Can we? Is it recording?
Yeah.
Sweet.
All right.
You asked.
We're done.
You asked where
What's alive in the room right
It's
now?
live in the room right now.
Just inverting this whole format straight off the bat.
Thank you for your question, Olivier. We've been talking for 2 hours actually, expressing our confusion. It's crazy how I instantly go into like podcasting mode, like presenting to an audience. Anyway, about the fact that we've been locked into a lot of pursuits of like meta works, thinking of like frames and systems that are helpful, but like not finding any objective, concrete project or work.
You guys should come over to the Paradox Lovers Club. Full Chaos Gremlin mode. Just give up the attempt for an objective grounding.
What about that?
It could just be a holiday. You can always come back again.
It's your...
That's my whole thing. That's my whole spiel. Yeah.
Oh, what's the Chaos Gremlin mode?
These are all just different words for the same thing. So I'm calling it post-quant, as in post-quantification, or Chaos Gremlin mode, or Paradox Lovers Club. And basically, it's straw-manning post-rationalism for its obsession with good epistemics, or having a rational way to process the results of doing woo things, like meta, like touching grass. And I realized to my chagrin that it's really just a restatement of Keegan's Stage 4, or Ladder Works of Wittgenstein, or anything that's basically like, you can't get a formal objective system that can subsume all of your other systems. Like at some stage, you're just arbitrarily moving between value systems, and like there's no extra one that's going to like tie it all together. You have to be comfortable with the fact that it is an ultimately relativistic existence, and so like then you sort of have this question, and Yanni was really frustrated with me talking about this as being chaos, but you have this question of like, how do you move between systems? And there, I think it's literally you surrender to vibes, you surrender to your intuition and your instinct, and it's a game. You do use maps and systems, but it's a bit. And like any game, when you're playing it, you really respect the rules. But you know, when you've stopped playing Cluedo, you no longer are treating it like someone's been murdered.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's perfectly compatible with post-rad. And I just wrote a post about that.
So I heard that you had done, and I was like, fuck, he's evolved faster than I can chase him. I have this like running joke in my head that like we're each other's foil, and this just so compounds it. I was like, I found a really cool straw man for like chic, and I'm gonna like write an essay about it. And then you write an essay that's that exact content, but backing it. Like, God. But I know I'm just starting to do long form writing. I definitely don't think seeing you as someone to measure up against is a great thing for me. It's starting off.
I've only started writing recently.
I feel like you've been writing for ages. I feel like you've got some miles under you.
I mean, tweets. I wrote my thesis.
What was your thesis about?
Modeling recommender systems and aligning them, but it was a mess. It was mostly an excuse to follow my curiosity in thesis shape. Did you write a master's thesis?
I wanted to, and I was told there was no way I'd pull it off by my philosophy tutor, which I simultaneously think was very mean and possibly accurate. What I wanted to do was articulate how I didn't think there was a distinction between phenomenology, qualia, if you will, and physical systems, that one is just the being of the other. And yeah, basically, how can we talk about that without the language sounding really weird? I feel like I could write that relatively easily now. I've spent the last sort of 20 odd years thinking, 15 odd years thinking more or less in that framework. But yeah.
Was that because before you became spiritual?
Yes. Yes, I had a very weird experience though. I realized that I had a lot of tools to go deep with spirituality, sort of lined up. So I'd had mental health issues for a long time, so I've been doing secular meditation for about 10 years. Also, when I was at uni, I was diagnosed with intrusive thought OCD. And so what the solution to that is, from a therapeutic point of view, is one, recognizing that your stream of consciousness, your thoughts, are not you. And this for me was just initially incompatible information. Like I had come to uni doing philosophy because I was like, the nature of mind is everything, and it's thoughts. That's surely the thing. Like, you know, thinking is the mind. So, you know, first thing I'm told, your running thoughts aren't you, and garbage can just start coming out of it like a malfunctioning system. And yeah, so I was like, well, how can I process this? Luckily, I was doing a paper on latter works of Wittgenstein at the time, and I started to think of how there are lots of different definitions of us. There's our running thoughts, there's our memories. Well, memories is not even a simple one. There's the memories you can recall now, there's the memories you will recall over a week, there's all the memories you've forgotten. Like, that is a very interesting definition of you, is all the memories you've forgotten. There's all the memories that your friends have of you. That, under many versions, is a very good way to get a description of you, but one that you might disagree with. There's legalistic definitions of you, and those are appropriate yous in certain contexts. So there's like all these different yous that exist from context to context, and none of them really actually get to take ownership. The running thoughts, that's just one of the outputs that our system makes.
That was in Wittgenstein that you...
I feel like it's tangentially related. Certainly that gave me this sort of like idea. I feel like I was just taking this moral of like meaning doesn't actually exist in big abstract letters somewhere. You don't deduce it from like heavy words like love and time. It's just a bunch of concrete, small games that we play together, things that are useful in one particular context or another. And yeah, apparently the self is like that. But I didn't really think that this had actually, you know, I was just like, oh, this is just part of my therapy. But I later, when I was doing sort of like no self-meditation, realized I'd been sitting with this as a core sort of belief of mine that the self is illusionary for a long time, just stubbornly refusing to look at the world in any kind of a mystical light. So yeah. And I had a whole sort of like materialist model of how you could frame spirituality and all that kind of stuff, which I merrily sort of like let go of and just actually dove in intuition first, as it were, when I sort of like shifted gears about 3 or 4 years ago.
Did that coincide with coming to Lisbon?
Yeah. It was actually partly caused by the stress of packing.
Same more.
I don't really want to, again, spread details about like who might have boned who, because some boning was involved, and yeah, let's just do some internal redacting. So I met a wizard down at the disco. He said, hey, yeah, let's go. No, I met a...
I can cut anything, by the way, like, nothing is being pushed in without consent, so if you're worried about, like, mistakenly saying something, you have full access to this.
Okay, right, well,
Promise to God.
so...
Although editing will be work, so if we can like avoid editing.
Yeah, a little bit. I'm happy to do.
So, I'm living with a friend. She finds Mystic on Twitter. Although doesn't know he's a mystic, actually, just knows he's a random person on Twitter. They start seeing each other. He comes around to house. Now, the first time they actually met up, my friend came back really shaken. And I was like, are you okay? Did something happen? And she's like, yeah, something happened, but nothing like, you know, rapey or anything like that. Like, I now believe in magic powers. And I was like, huh, that's not what I was expecting. But I meet the guy, and I realize how magic works, essentially. At least from the point of view of someone who's not yet doing it intuitively. And why it's real. And really this ties into why everything is a lot more loosey-goosey in terms of what's real than we think. So most people are pretty familiar with the idea that our visual field isn't as concrete as it feels like it is. Like if you stare at something and things change really quickly in different quadrants, the entire scene can change without you having noticed any of the changes. And then you're shown the pictures like, this is what it looked like a minute ago, and you're like, no. Or the classic one of like, count the number of times people are passing basketballs and you don't notice the guy in the gorilla suit walking straight through. The same thing happens with our awareness of time, rather disconcertingly for some people. We have this impression that we become aware of things, we make choices, and then we make actions. Actually, we tend to make actions before we have become aware of a choice, and then later sort of rearrange the awareness of the choice to precede the action. For the same reason that we sort of like perceive a unified visual field, it's much easier to reason about the world if this is our sort of like sense of how it works. And yeah, what I think people are doing when they sort of like, read minds or present a explanation for how someone got here or what happened in the future or the past. What I think they're doing is they're using their skills as a storyteller, as a narrator, as someone who can sense the vibes of another person, someone who knows a bunch of rituals that have cultural weight, to propose a version of the world, like half of a circle. And the other person makes it real by choosing to believe it. So if you have a sufficient proposal and adoption, then a new world becomes real, and in many ways has always been real, because it can define the past differently. And you can sort of like bunch in a ball and be like, that's just lying, but it's like, it seems like the same process that our like more down to earth sensory systems are doing.
So if I get you correctly, it sounds like you're saying that any story that's like compatible with the past light cone that I have access to right now, or that multiple people have access to right now, is valid, and so you can sort of redefine the rest of the past based on the story. We have 10 minutes.
Basically.
Yeah, I've seen like models of magic sort of like this before.
And so I don't remember really how we got here, actually, but
Because
becoming spiritual.
becoming spiritual. There's actually something I realize I want to try and talk about that's not this, because I did just do a whole rundown of this. I have been working with some feelings of social abandonment recently, and I feel like I just did a really nice painting about this on the side of the house, which is there's an Easter egg for you guys when I'm gone. And yeah, it's been really healing and wholesome being here, because I realize that where a lot of this feeling is coming from is a sort of like mistrust of actually having friends. I remember very vividly at one point a friend of mine talking about other people who often came to the warehouse as being my friends, and I snapped back, but they're not really my friends, they're your guys' friends, like I barely know them. And yeah, I knew them less well, but like this was kind of a crazy reaction in many ways. And yeah, I think I can get very clingy. I think I can get very sort of needy when I am not doing well, partially because of this fear of loneliness. And being around here has been really lovely to just be in the very easy sort of like coming and going of like whether you're in the center of something, whether you're sort of asleep in the corner, and it's given my sort of like system a lot of chances to just feel safe around that. And yeah, I guess I'm curious whether you guys relate to any of this at all, or if not, what your thoughts are on that.
So the images that I had is like, I think it's always like interesting and like even relaxing for me to hear like these kind of struggles from someone that like, as you said, like you were, I don't know, in a good place when you were here in Portal and being able to like handle better these kind of thoughts. And maybe as a consequence of that, you appear like extremely charming and like helpful to everyone and like easygoing, easy to feel friendly with, and like I don't know, for example, felt easily accepted with you, and that always gives, in a way, I don't know, I've had so many experiences of like meeting someone who's like suddenly like in a really good place, extremely charming, and like forming an image of them as someone who like has that easy and like couldn't have this kind
no
of
internal problems at all.
Exactly.
I think we all do that.
Yeah.
I think we all do that.
I know that's crazy, right?
No, I have to clock myself the whole time where I'm like, oh man, this person just seems like they've really got their shit together. I bet they're just like sort of like chill and competent the entire time. They're like, no, I am actively worrying right now. Yeah. It's interesting though, like I have been in a really good place here, but I have also been processing like, yeah, these feelings. Like it's like realizing that part of my desire to be energetic around people comes from a fear of like suddenly losing something important. And it's been a journey, and it's been really lovely to step back from that and to enjoy other people's space more. Or is this like paradox, taking the space in an interview while professing this?
So, yeah, like I really see that, you're trying to appear energetic and like being a net contribution because you're afraid of being experienced as like draining and being ejected from some social group. Is that right, I guess, first?
So I think that's definitely a part of it. I think that's a big part of it. I think it's... So what comes to mind as you say that is not necessarily being ejected from a social group, it's having to sit with this very particular feeling of emptiness or loneliness or uncertainty. And I think some of that comes from like the idea that things might become awkward or nothing might happen and that would be bad, or like I don't even know what it is, but you know, a catastrophizing part of the brain is there really worrying. And I had a very weird spiritual experience the other night leaning into this, because basically what I feel like is there is a feeling tone of loneliness that I've been very afraid of actually spending any time with. And I can now see, like having sort of named it, I can see how much I've been looking at it, or how much I've been reacting and like turning away from it with like a lot of force in the past. So after having a night out with Portal people, I was lying on my bed, and I had this sort of like twinge. I was like, okay, let's meditate with this. Let's sort of like lean into it. And I had easily one of the trippiest imaginable experiences that I've had for a long time. It started with very interesting sensations of like sort of an intense, almost cool feeling filling the body sort of changing shape and volume, sort of like arms becoming like cones, expanding towards the hands, since the body was much larger and almost like floating in space. And then, and this is definitely going to sound crazy, but then I had the sensation of a big green portal or door opening above my body and a face poking through, grumpy, angry looking face, saying, you know, you shouldn't be able to do this. And we had a conversation. I always do. I try and be very polite and very like respectful whenever I encounter weird entities. But one thing I noticed was that this this permission to sort of like drop into the void and sort of not try and guard myself against it, kept going, and I started to sort of like see through this being's structure. Sort of like, almost like a part of me was like diving into its body. And this was actually quite scary for me. I was very worried I was going to do harm. I am serious when I say I try and be respectful and loving. I don't know who these entities are or where they come from. I'm aware that I am traveling very chaotically through uncharted space. But yeah, I tried to accept that this is just what was happening right now. And, you know, my ego's there trying to control it, but I'm just going to hope that I'm not doing harm. I don't want to do harm, and let things happen. I also explained to the entity that this was what was going on, that they got considerably upset and said again, I should not be able to do this, and then pulled their head back through the portal, and had a very strange experience of almost like all across my body, tendrils suddenly trying to latch on and prevent them from leaving. How are you doing?
I think I'm just signaling time. Because I wanted to stay in time.
Yeah, and I talked to River about this because he's a imaginal dude.
Yeah.
And yeah, this sense of suddenly and intensely grasping for something and having like to really down-regulate my system to be able to let this entity go on its way was quite intense. But at the end of it, you know, I'd faced up to what I thought was an insurmountably terrifying feeling. Seen a bunch of stuff had happened in that space. Some of it had been like a case of relaxing and allowing stuff to happen. Some of it had been a case of I need to apply some effort here and like actually control myself. And came out the other side and well, slept.
Do you think it had anything to do with your fear of abandonment or non-belonging?
I feel like the feeling tone definitely was. And it's interesting that, like, you know, basically a very judgmental figure popped out of nowhere and said, you know, you shouldn't be doing what you're doing, or you shouldn't be able to do what you're doing. So yeah, there do seem to be some connections.
Cool. Do you think the entity was like part of your personality?
That's not how I see them, the entities I bump into. Often it's much more obvious that they're sort of forces of some kind. In this case, I have a harder time understanding it. It's much weirder than a lot of the interactions that I've had in sort of like spiritual domains. But certainly my framing is that this is something that's a product of the world and me. And yeah, I think this is the interesting thing about magic is like psychology tells us that everything we're experiencing is effectively like gunk in the machine of our brain. And a magical interpretation or a spiritual interpretation is that like everything is basically real. Your subjective experience is like fundamentally a part of the world. And so yeah, from a materialist point of view, this was, I'm sure, a part of me expressing itself. But that's not how I feel it and experience it. Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's different frameworks for different things. If I wanted to build a machine, if I wanted to make a protocol that would work no matter who used it, I probably wouldn't describe it in magical terms.
Yeah.
But if I want to understand the nature of how I feel about the world and my experience, then, you know, treating the subjective experience like seriously and building tools out of that seems to be the way to go.
It's just the moment. That's great, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
Really, really good mix of like heavy, emotional, tying it back to the magical, materialist interpretation.
Yeah, I'm happy we got that bridge in there at the end.
How do you feel going out, like leaving? You're about to go back to London.
Yeah, well, no, I'm going to go to the Loire Valley and stay with a family friend. She's this awesome nurse, quite a bit older than us, who lives there with her boyfriend and tends her garden, and is just like, I've never spent much time with her, but she's a family friend, and I want to practice my French, so go there, be peaceful, integrate this last 2 and a bit months of wandering around Europe. How do I feel leaving Portal? Very grateful. I think I felt a lot sadder last night and this morning, and a lot more confused. And I'm kind of like, yeah, that's natural. Like, apart from anything, my sort of like plan of 2 days in Portal and then doing my own stuff for the rest of the week has been much more chaotic. It's fine. Like, I learned something about like what helps me regulate, and I've also really enjoyed every day that I've actually been here. Like, taking time to process something is something I am learning right now. So the fact that I've had these quite nice challenges I see it as net positive. Which is not to endorse people being dicks for the sake of like causing people challenges. I've also encountered that over the last few days. So yeah, I feel good. I look forward to sort of the next teapot thing I'm able to attend, and it's given me a lot of faith in the container I want to try and make and produce.
Yeah, you want to give like a quick summary of the container you want to try to...
Very, very, very quick summary. So, as you can tell, I value the subjective and the spiritual and the artistic pretty hard. And I want to create a container called Subjective House, which is a month-long retreat for a cohort of artists and a cohort of meditators / spiritualists. And, I'm happy to accept that this definition will change, but the idea is you've got 6 artists, and the main incentive there is to stop being lonely in their practices, to let down their boundaries of what is their style and freely absorb each other's like practices and techniques and create a movement together. And what the sort of pitch is for the meditators is, apart from here's a lovely place to meditate for a month in nature, to tell their stories of the spiritual sort of domain that they exist in to the artists, and cultivate an aesthetic that is unique and resonant with the kind of unique aspects of spirituality that I feel like our space is exploring. Because I don't think we're reinventing and discovering new parts of Buddhism. Like, we are, if anything, slowly getting a handle on like all of these fantastic like lineages of concentration and different things that India's been amazing at and Buddhism's very, very good at, but we are doing it in our own way. Like, we're not adhering to any of the old lineages and any of the old divisions between practices, and it's new and it's exciting, and it's filling it as a very specific niche in the West and in Europe, where we don't have a lot of faith in spirituality. So I think it deserves its own aesthetic, and I think the artist also will need something. Like, I had this just doing my painting. It started as a doodle, and at some point I started to hesitate, and I realized I needed something more than just doodling if I was going to have the confidence to see this through. You need something substantive. And what could possibly be more substantive than the sort of spiritual faith that as a community we've been developing? So to create a container where these two things can really come together and nurture and attempt to form an artistic movement and attempt to form a nice incubator for the meditators, and do it for a month. So a lot of this is still being planned, but I've written a manifesto for it, and I know that I need roughly £36,000 because I want it to be fully funded. That's the goal, is people can just come, and people are paying to be artists and meditators. This is something that culture should pay them to do, because we're all going to reap the rewards. So yeah, that's my elevator pitch.
Sweet. Yeah. The first thing that comes to mind is like Sylvia doing like her pieces about phenomenology. Like that feels like sort of in the same vein of
It is
representing spiritual insights in visual art.
it is. If I was going to hold up someone who I think is doing this really well, it would probably be Sylvia, or there's also Anansi. Wait, is that how you say his name?
Yeah.
Yeah. He does a lot of very cool stuff in this domain. I mean, massive yin yang energy divide between Sylvia and Anansi. Lightning versus cuddles. So yeah, those are two very good examples.
Sweet. Yeah.
So
Should we wrap it up?
I just want to say thank you to Chic for like organizing Portal
And beer?
and Beer, Chic and Beer. Yeah, much love to Beer. Yeah, thank you guys for making this happen, and of course to all of us for being here and filling the space. Yeah,
Thanks for coming and
Yeah,
being part
thank
of
you.
it.
my pleasure. I'm glad I barreled in like the chaotic little gremlin I am.
Speedrunning the hero's journey.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, you got 2 days before the middle of the hero's journey and 2 days after the middle of the hero's journey, so you get like a micro hero's journey right at the like apex of the bottom,
Yeah,
at the
yeah.
valley.
Yeah. I was your guide through hell.
Yeah, no, for real. Yeah. Like as a guy through hell, you had your own hero's journey. Like as we were going through hell. Yeah, it's crazy. All right, group hug.
Group hug.
Group hug. All right.
Great one.
Yeah, I think this is a promising start.
Yeah.